So what I say to myself in that situation where I'm going, right, I don't feel great. Ideally, I would love to just rest right now, but I can't. So what do I do instead? I say to myself, okay, what's important? What is important today that I get done? And I try my very best to only focus on that thing and to just let everything else go. And that can be really hard because it can mean that the house is a mess. I cannot expend that energy on anything that is not critical right now. I've got all these to-do lists swirling around in the back of my head. But you have to make a choice.
Hello and welcome to Psychology in the Wild, the podcast where we try to make sense of the chaos of everyday life. I'm Dr. Gemma Roberts.
And I'm Erin Shrimpton.
Erin, what's wild?
Gemma, this has been a wild week. I mean, most weeks we say, ooh, there's a lot of wild stuff going on. But in reality, it's the humdrum and the absolute mundane, everyday stuff. Not that we're saying that that's not challenging, because often it very much is, which is exactly why we're doing this podcast. But this week, I have been to California, which is most certainly wild. So I've been over and back to California to visit family, but also I was recording some LinkedIn Learning courses, which is very exciting. You know all about that, of course. You've recorded courses in that very same studio in the past as well.
Yep.
So you know exactly what it's like. But I'd never been there. So I have probably about 10 or 11 courses on LinkedIn Learning now. And so LinkedIn Learning, in case we're talking about it as though everyone should know what it is, but just in case anyone listening doesn't know what LinkedIn Learning is, it is an arm of LinkedIn where you can watch online course content. So it's online education and it covers a huge range of topics. Pretty much anything you want to learn will be on there. But Gemma and I do courses on LinkedIn Learning all about psychology, topics in psychology. Gemma's got one on emotional intelligence, for example, and resilience, your big topic. Mine are around things like navigating change and leading culture change and that kind of thing. Anyway, so that's what I was doing last week. I was filming that in California and it was wild. I was really looking forward to it. So my first experience with LinkedIn Learning was at the beginning of 2020, and I was supposed to go and film my courses then. And of course, we all know what happened in 2020. Nobody went anywhere. So I ended up filming most of my courses up to now in this tiny little box room in my house. And it actually was brilliant.
We call it your studio.
Yeah, it's in my studio. Yeah, this is my studio. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in my studio here. And actually the people from LinkedIn Learning are so great. They're so much fun and total pros that they made that whole experience, nerve-wracking as it was, they managed to make it fun despite the fact that it was right in the deepest, darkest lockdown. So I knew going over there and experiencing the filming process in real life would be great, and it was brilliant. So I really, really enjoyed it. They have everything set up there. It's a proper film studio. There's a green room, as you know. They have an amazing restaurant with lots of nice food. I love the way that's up in my top 3 things that I mentioned. But for somebody I work by myself all the time, as you know, as we often discuss here. I'm on my own here most of the day, doing whatever it is I'm doing for work, and also then, you know, in the home. And to be in a kind of a social working environment where you can go and get food and delicious food and work on a team with people, it was a total revelation. I'd forgotten how much I love working with teams and working on a team. You know, it was only for 1 week and they were very welcoming. So it was a great experience. I mean, I'm really pleased to be home, though, I have to say. It was a long time to be away. And I really, really missed everyone back here. Originally, my kids were supposed to come with me, and lots of things changed and happened along the way, so we weren't able to do that. So I was there by myself, which obviously is lovely to have a bit of time by myself, but it was also just that little bit too long to be away from them. So yeah, so that is my experience in LinkedIn Learning. And then the other thing though that went on last week, there was a few kind of minor catastrophes and calamities along the way. One of which, well, first of all, I had a flat tire, 2 flat tires on my way into the studio one day.
I wouldn't
I
even
had to,
know when you left me a voice note about the flat tires. I was just because I know the drive. I know you
yeah,
stayed, and I know the drive
I know.
into the studios. And I was like, "Oh my god, how on earth did you handle that?" I don't know what I would have done. And I don't. I was thinking, oh, I could just would have cried. I wouldn't have cried because I was not going to help anything. But I think I just would have been like, "Do I call the police? Do I what do I do here?" Because it's not like we've got contacts over there either. It's not like you just
Yeah,
speak to the people in the studio. Like, and also we do things super early because of the jet lag, and not everyone in the
yeah.
studio is there yet by the time we're kind
No,
of
it
getting
was
ourselves there and getting there. So fill me in on this story because I haven't actually heard it in person yet. I've only heard
well,
it via a voice note.
it was before 8. So exactly, I was trying to call. I found the number for the LinkedIn Learning Studios, and I was trying to call them, but I couldn't get through. And so then, of course, I was simultaneously trying to work out, okay, well, I need to call roadside rescue because I can't just leave the car here. I have to do something about it. And 2 massive flat tires. And so then, of course, I was on the phone to, the equivalent of their AA. I can't even remember who it was now. It was all just such a whirlwind. And I managed, while I was on the phone on hold to them, to contact one of the people who we work with at LinkedIn Learning, who was an absolute gem, and he came and picked me up. So I had a proper roadside rescue. There was also another guy who just came over, and he was like, I've noticed you being here for a while. Are you okay? And of course, on my own in the middle of a strange country, I was kind of terrified.
On a
But he turned
highway.
out on a highway. Exactly. I was like, okay,
Like,
this is like something from Fargo or, some kind of scary movie. And I was like, no, actually, he was totally lovely, very well intentioned, really just trying to help me move the car. Obviously, 99% of the time, that's usually the case. But, people are well intentioned, as we like to think. So yeah, so that was a little bit stressful because I knew I had to be in there, but I had no way of telling them that I was running late, and I don't know what they must have thought I was up to. But anyway, thankfully it became clear when I got there. I'm afraid I had a flat tire. So that was a little calamity. The other calamity I had was I've had ongoing. So as you know, I've had so back in around July, I think I caught COVID. Well, what we think was probably COVID. I actually don't know for sure, but I've had a kind of a recurring chest infection since then, and then it turned into pleurisy, which kind of sounds worse than it is. Remember when I texted you to say I had pleurisy, you were like, is that something from the Dark Ages? No,
literally, are
it's
you medieval?
yeah. Well, I am, but that's another story. Um, Pleurisy is like inflammation of the pleura, which is the lining of the lungs. And basically, it's not serious, but it's just very painful. And yeah, so it's sore and it makes you feel quite tired. So I have had these ongoing, and I mean, I've had ongoing respiratory issues now, well, since I was a kid, but in the last few years, it's been particularly bad. Um, and so I'm kind of used to plowing on through life with either, a sinus or a chest infection or whatever it might be. But it raised its head again last week after I arrived in California. And so I was trying to record the courses whilst also, my chest was pretty sore and I was coughing a bit. And during the nighttime, I was coughing quite a lot as well. And so one of the nights, one of the evenings that I was there, I just thought, gosh, I hope this isn't something to worry about. I better get it checked out. So I went down to the local health centre, and I was thinking, I don't know, I don't have health insurance in America because, obviously I don't know what they're going to charge me for this, but I better just get it checked out. Anyway, this lovely nurse came to my rescue, and she listened to my chest and said, look, there's nothing to worry about. It's probably just, this ongoing allergic response. So it's fine. But then we got chatting, and 45 minutes later, I was still in there with her while she sang me Irish folk songs. because, because once she heard that I was Irish, she was all over it. She herself isn't Irish, but she sings in Irish rock bands, and she was telling me about her kind of transcendent moment watching U2 and how much she loved Irish music and singing me all these songs. I was thinking, this could only happen in the USA. This experience.
100%. And it can only happen to an Irish person in the USA.
Yeah.
I mean, no one has stopped me to sing Spice Girls songs as yet. I mean, it might happen at some point, but it hasn't happened just yet. But
yeah,
I mean, that woman probably thought it was her lucky day for an actual, because you wonder where we stay as well. So it's not far from Santa Barbara, but it's teeny tiny where the LinkedIn Learning Studios are. I can't imagine there's a huge amount of real life Irish people that drop in there. So this woman probably thought it was her lucky day. And it was your lucky day as well, getting it checked out and everything's fine.
It was my lucky day because she didn't charge me either. I mean, free healthcare in America, that is definitely something to write home about, which I literally did. I texted my husband immediately. I was like, I've just got free healthcare in America because I'm Irish. So that was another event. And thankfully, after all of that, there was no other major events of note. But, I think maybe it's a good kind of segue into the topic which we're going to talk about today, because I was kind of thinking about the fact that in life, we so often hear about, well, especially at the moment, right? The wellness industry is constantly promoting so much about how to stay well and all the tips you need to promote your well-being. And we all know all the good stuff, right? We do. But what about when you're not feeling well? Like, what about when you're below par? And I don't mean seriously unwell, because obviously there are times, like, for example, over the summer when I had a hardcore chest infection, which wouldn't shift, I did have to cancel work, and I did have to, we cancelled recording, for example, this podcast. But what about when you're in that in-between stage where you're just feeling kind of like just below par, and, you're not really unwell enough to stop working. And let's face it, if you're parenting, there's pretty much nothing that will stop you from having to parent unless you literally are in hospital, in a bed in hospital. That's probably the only thing.
Yep.
So we have to find some strength to keep going. And what are the well-being, or what are the tips, not even well-being, but what are the tips to kind of help you keep going through that? And it doesn't even have to be that you're feeling unwell. It's just like, what if you're having a crap week? What if something awful has happened but you still have to show up at work? So I just thought maybe we should talk through that, because I know I'm not the only one who experiences that. I think
I think we
a
all
lot of
do.
people out there. Exactly. Yeah.
We all do in one way or another. And it can, like you say, it can be in so many different guises. It can be something like, what you did last week is kind of out of the ordinary in some respects. Like, even for us, I don't travel. I used to travel a lot more frequently to California, but to filming. But even then, it was 2 or 3 times a year at its peak. It wasn't like, it's not something we were doing weekly. But then there's those things week to week, like you could be feeling a bit rubbish. Something could happen. You could be dealing with stress. You could be dealing with, we've got so many life calamities going on in our household at the moment. And in some respects, that can sometimes be harder to deal with. The day-to-day stuff we talk about, and I know we joke a lot about the day-to-day challenges that we face. And I do worry sometimes when we're talking about them that, they're quite minor. We talk about like juggling stuff or feeling under the weather. But the reason we do that is because actually sometimes that's quite hard to talk about, because I find when it's something big going on, you kind of... So when you were away last week, for example, I had a chest infection, and if we were recording, we wouldn't have been able to record the podcast because I couldn't speak. I had no voice. So, there's stuff that had to stop last week. I had to change plans. Whereas when you've got stuff going on, that's the kind,
so in a way, although it's awful, you feel terrible, but it makes it easier, because it's like, no, this is clear cut. I know a doctor has told me I have a chest infection and therefore I'm too unwell to work. Yeah.
It's that, what do you do in the in-between stuff? And I think, we talk about well-being is part of my research stuff. Like, we talk about this stuff all the time. But, I like this idea of addressing, what do we do when we don't feel like a well-being? If we don't just feel, it could be physically, it could be emotionally. And actually, I had we've had some childcare drama in our house this
Oh,
week. So,
my
I mean,
fave.
I know. I mean,
Oh.
that is, so my two children, we're in half term this week and next week. And my two children were supposed to be at one of their grandparents for 3 days who lives by the
Mhm.
coast, and they go down and they do all these amazing activities that my mother-in-law plans for them. But she's got shingles. So
Oh,
obviously, she's really, really unwell and the kids can't go, which means I'd
yeah.
crammed 2 weeks worth of work into 3 days thinking, "Well, the kids aren't here, so I'll just work really long hours. They'll go and have
Oh,
fun. They won't
no.
even know." And now you can imagine, obviously, they're home. So my husband and I are trying to juggle this week. And so I had the girls this morning. We had to go and pop and do something. And I actually asked their advice. I said, "What do you do if," and bear in mind they're 5 and 7. And I said, "Well, what do you do if you're not feeling great?" And their first
Yeah.
response was, "You take medicine." And I was like, "Aha,
Okay.
okay." I mean, that
Yeah.
does kind of give you an insight into how much Calpol we probably go through in our house,
Yeah.
which is basically kids' paracetamol for anyone not in the UK. But I was like, "Right, okay." And then they were kind of scooching off and doing their own thing. And I was like, "Okay, okay, okay." I said, "What about if it's not that your body doesn't feel great, but maybe your emotions don't feel great? What do you do?" And they
Mhm.
came up with 2 things that they should be doing and everyone should be doing, apparently. Because I said, "Does this apply to
Okay.
everyone, or is it just you two?" So number 1 was, um, get a cuddle from someone. And I was like,
Oh, I like that
"Oh,
one.
I know,
Yeah.
I know." As adults, I'm not entirely sure we can kind of just stop people in the street, and get a cuddle, but I was kinda like,
Yes.
"Okay, in the psychology world, how does that translate?" And which well, they're probably, I mean, they're talking about physical comfort, but really they're talking about connection or support from other people, which
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
applies to adults as well. Um,
Yeah.
and the second one was think happy thoughts. And
Okay.
I had to think about that one because obviously I have a bit of a
Yeah.
love-hate relationship with positivity. Obviously,
I
I don't. I
know.
want us to all be positive.
And the
But
word happy as well, I have
and
a
the
bit of a,
happy.
ooh,
Yeah.
an allergic response to.
I was a
Not
bit
that I
like,
don't want to be happy or anybody in my life to be happy, but I just feel like it's sort of misrepresented so much that, there is a myth that happiness is some sort of a permanent state, which it absolutely isn't. So,
no,
yeah.
it's
But
fleeting.
thinking
And
happy
it's,
thoughts.
well, I kind of was translating that into, because, well, firstly, I was kind of addressing with them that they're not ignoring the fact they feel bad. And I said, it's okay to feel sad or angry or, whatever you're feeling. And yeah, you can add other emotions in there as well that might be more positive, brilliant. Um, but we had to have a discussion about, you don't have to have happy thoughts over other thoughts. You can have lots of different thoughts. But what it did get me thinking about, and I was thinking, how does this apply to adult life, and psychology as well, what we know from research? And actually, I thought it kind of aligns a little bit with gratitude. So just noticing
Yeah.
things that are positive in your life. And that doesn't mean like
Yes.
ignoring the bad, because I think there are serious
Mm-mm.
issues if we try and suppress things that are really challenging, don't work through them. And that can have such a negative impact on our mental health long term. So, but what I would say is, if we're not feeling great emotionally, I think we should have that. And I think we should hold that and experience that. But you can add other emotions in as well, such as gratitude, for example. So you can
Yes, I like that.
appreciate some of the good in
Yeah.
life as well. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that was those are the tips from a 5 and 7-year-old. I'm not sure how they're going to line from tips from 2 psychologists, but I guess
Well,
that's for us to
I
decide.
didn't have get a hug in there, but I'm actually gonna add that to mine. I
I
like
might have
that.
it to mine as well, particularly from the 5 and 7-year-old. I'd quite like a hug, but I don't feel great. Actually, that actually does really help me.
Yeah. Do you know what I was thinking as you were saying that? My equivalent of getting a hug now is going and turning on my red light. It's
I
like,
need to get one of these.
okay, so people probably know this is definitely not a psychology tip, by the way, but I feel like a red light is sort of it's an infrared light, and I'm not going to go as far as to say it's changed my life, but it's definitely a necessary piece of kit to have in my life in this country. So, and it's not one of those mask things that people, I don't know, I'm being I'm being fed advertising about those red light masks left, right, and centre, probably because of my demographic. But apparently they are actually really effective for anti-aging. Uh, and and so therefore, I'm sure I will and would like to have one. But the reason I use the red light, it's more like a little box thing, probably about the size of a small TV. And red light and infrared light can penetrate deep into your muscle to reduce inflammation. It can really help to improve cold and flu symptoms. My husband used it as well because he has a bad neck issue. And I honestly feel like once I've had 15 minutes with my red light, I just feel that kind of, calm after it. So it must do something to the nervous system as well. I think it regulates, in some way regulates the nervous system. It's probably just because it's relaxing that, you know, but I often find, like I found when I was away from it for a while, I was looking forward to coming home to my red light in the way I
I'm
was looking
definitely
forward to
gonna
a hug. Yeah.
I am definitely gonna get one. You sent me the link to your one when you were away, so I'm definitely
I
you've
mean,
just reminded me.
they're just on Amazon for like €80 or something. So it's not wildly expensive, but I do think I would definitely recommend it, especially for anybody who suffers from any kind of chronic respiratory issues, chronic pain. They definitely, if I've got like a sore back, which partly with pleurisy you get like a sore shoulder and back and sore chest, and it definitely alleviates that feeling of inflammation that you get. So that wasn't actually one of my recommendations for today, but just while you talk about it there, I realized that one of my things that I look forward to when I'm not feeling well is a bit of time with my red light, which is a bit sad because that's a machine.
Maybe we can touch on this AI robot thing as well that's kind
Yeah,
of
I
been
mean, where's the
podcasted
world coming
through.
to? Hmm.
I think it's okay. I think
So,
a red light is kind of okay. I think we're safe with that for the time being. Well, there's a good tips. Anyone else that has, another medieval disease, then maybe a red light
hit up
is
your
what
red
we
light.
need. But
But
actually,
actually, it does.
it's physical. Like it's some kind of
Yeah,
physical, I don't know, like easing of something
yeah,
or but it's funny that you say it feels a bit like so maybe it is something to do with doing something physically for your body sometimes
yeah,
can help you when you're in that place. So it could be something
yeah.
like a red light, it could be a hug,
Mm-hmm.
it could be
Mm-hmm.
exercise. So what I find
Mm-hmm.
interesting about exercise when I'm not feeling great is choosing the right kind of exercise.
Yeah, totally.
Um, because again, not that I'm a guru on this front, I'm a psychologist. But I'm talking about my personal experience here. I often try, so I know I have to do something physical when I'm not fit, unless you're at the point where you actually just have to, you're at that point where it's the cutoff, you just have to rest and
You
that's
have
all
to
you can
rest.
do.
Yeah.
But it's thinking things like, okay, do I need to walk? Do I just need to get my body
Mm-hmm.
moving and be outside, some fresh air, being in nature, moving, which I really enjoy? Or do I need to, am I feeling like really sluggish and would something a bit more kind of active, a bit more cardio based? Is that kind of
Yeah.
what you're going to need in that moment? Or is it something like, I love Pilates. I love classical Pilates, which is like reformer stuff, but it's so hard and teeny, teeny, tiny movements. You have to concentrate on tiny little things. I can't think about anything
Mm-hmm.
else when I'm doing that. So that's quite good if I'm feeling overwhelmed or even just a little bit stressed. That's really, and actually I need to find a new studio. That's a whole nother story. Um or yoga. Some people might find that
Mm-hmm.
stretching.
Okay.
Um But it could be like a more, I was going to say aggressive form of yoga. I'm not sure yoga should ever be called aggressive, but like faster pace.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's
I
finding the
mean,
right thing for you. So maybe
yeah.
the answer is then having these um, things that could help you. Well, let's talk through those kind of big
Mm.
buckets of like one would be something physical, and then
Yeah.
deciding within that what would help you at that time. Because sometimes I need to push myself, get my blood flowing. I need to kind
Mm-hmm.
of bash something out or, sweat something out. Other
Yeah.
times I need to be a bit more kind of gentle with it. So,
Mm.
what other kind of big buckets of things do you think we could be thinking about when it comes to not feeling great?
I think of this a bit like knowing your resources. So,
Yeah.
what are the resources that you go to when you are feeling below par. And so I think, yeah, having physical activity is definitely one. And then within that, knowing what level of physical activity to choose based on how you're feeling. And that can sometimes be really, really hard. Sometimes you don't know until after you've done it. Because sometimes you might need to go, you might be feeling like uptight or tense, and you might need to go for a run or something really, cardio based. But actually, no, if you're not feeling very well, if you've got a respiratory infection, for example, it's probably not the best thing to go for a run. So it can be quite hard to choose. So it's very important to tune in, learn more to tune in to what resource you need at what time. But I think it's important to kind of have those resources as much as possible in your back pocket. So I think sometimes, so the physical is definitely one. Another one is just like what the girls were suggesting, what support you need. And whether that is literally practical support, you need to call someone up and say, hey, can you help me with this thing? Because I'm not feeling great. Or it might just be that you need to call someone up and chat to them about whatever's going on for you. And that in and of itself is a resource. If you're at work, it might be, if you have a supportive manager, you might want to talk to your manager and have a bit of a coaching session with them. That's a resource as well. So even self-coaching. I was reading our good friend and colleague, another LinkedIn learning instructor, Tatiana Colavu, yesterday, her newsletter, which was brilliant, but there was a part in it about self-coaching. And self-coaching even is a resource. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, think of all of these things as resources in your toolkit that you can draw upon when you're not feeling great. And the important thing is, obviously, for everybody, it'll be different. So what you need to kind of think about when you're well, that is one thing you would do when you're feeling well. Try and tune into, okay, what are the things that I should have in my back pocket in those moments where I'm not feeling great? So for me, it's like my red light, or I find acupuncture really good. So that's another thing. I try to go regularly, but I know if I'm feeling particularly not a good spot, I would try and book an acupuncture appointment or go for a massage or something like that. Is there anything else that you use as a resource?
I kind of align. So I was thinking about this as you were talking about support. I use connection quite a lot. And the reason I say that separately to support is because sometimes that will provide support. Sometimes I actually avoid connection because I'm so overwhelmed and I haven't got anything else to give. And also it can be connection to different things. It could be connection to people. Where you might have a supportive conversation, or even just being around someone that understands you or what you're going through. But it can also be connection to things like nature, or to art, or something you enjoy, or architecture, or travel, or just connection to something that is important to you. And sometimes that will be, and often that's people. But the reason I kind of think about this separately to support is sometimes, and support's always good, and the research is there. Especially when we talk about things like resilience, for example, support is one of the least talked about factors that can influence how resilient you are. So it's and I know this from my research, it has one of the biggest impacts on how resilient you're going to be over the long term. But it's one of the things that we focus on least. So, that's a really easy one to put in your resource toolkit, to think about that.
So is that support from other people?
Support from other people.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah. And it could be exactly as you say. It could be practical. It could be emotional. It can be physical sometimes. Any kind of, so it could be friends, it could be colleagues, family. But connection's different. And sometimes the thing I'll say about that is, I think about the lead up to Christmas. This is where my head is at the moment. Thinking about the lead up and getting prepared for that. And sometimes I find myself overcommitting in the run up to Christmas. I don't know why I do this every year. So every year I think to myself, I don't have to go and do all these social events. It is not the last time I'm going to see every group of friends.
I mean,
why do we always have to have Christmas drinks?
It's so funny, isn't it? We all do
Christmas
it.
dinner.
It's like, we must get our Christmas drinks in. And it's like, but if you get Christmas drinks in with everybody, you literally spend the entire December. You've got a birthday in December as well. So that's
Yeah. And my
another,
birthday. And
yeah.
I find sometimes I overcommit to things. I find myself, the amount of Christmases I've spent really unwell because we're talking my younger years, pre-kids really, where I had a lot of fun in December and I'd kind of crash when we got to Christmas. So, every year I'm like, I'd be very conscious. I'm not doing this Christmas drinks monarchy. Like, I would just see people like I normally see them in the normal cadence that I normally see people, and
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't really happen. So sometimes I overcommit, and sometimes when things get really stressful, I don't always have the capacity to be the best friend that I can be, or
Yeah. Yeah.
even parent, partner. Like, and sometimes I just need to kind of retreat a bit to recuperate. And it comes back to this, and that reminds me of one of the definitely when I went through a period of burnout, one of the definitions, one of the definitions of burnout that made me realize I had it was that my resources are things that should start to build you up. So things like,
Mm-hmm.
we've been talking about physical exercise or emotional support, or they're things that are going to help you in life. They're your resources. And when your resources start to feel like demands,
Yeah.
you're in a really bad place. And that, for me,
Yeah.
was an indication that I was in burnout, because things that should have been resources, connecting with my friends, doing fun things with the kids, booking a massage, like things that should have been good for me, should feel good, because I was so overwhelmed with life and the sheer amount of things that I was doing. They started
Mm.
to feel like extra demands, and I couldn't really give
Mm.
my all to it. So that was a clear indication for me. So it's something we
That's
have to think
definitely, yeah.
about.
Yeah, because I that's the definition of burnout that I find most helpful to think about, and to stop when I'm feeling myself below par. I stop myself and go, right, what's the balance of demands and resources going on right now? Because when our demands are high, but our resources are also high enough to meet those demands, and this is based on some research, um, then actually your well-being outcomes are more likely to be positive. So, because people always think, it's burnout, it's just because my demands are so high. But actually, if your resources are balancing those demands in a good way, you can keep going, and it's fine. I mean, it's not to say that you should keep going forevermore with really, really high demands and really stressful environment, but we've all been there, in a world where we're working on something really stressful and big, and like a big project at work or whatever. But if you've got the right resources in place, you've got childcare in place, you're sleeping well, you've got all the things there lined up to keep you taking over, then you can, actually you thrive in that environment. But when those resources start to fall away, that is when burnout. And I think that's a lot, when organizations look at burnout and when teams look at burnout, it's often the first thing they look at is reducing demands, which in a lot of cases they probably should. But because often I would argue there's a lot of unnecessary demands in organizations and teams. But often it's that the resources aren't there. It's
Mm.
that managers aren't trained well enough to support their teams, for example. So I think that's a really, and for individuals, like, for us, each of us navigating all the chaos, it's a really good question to ask yourself when you're feeling that
Mm.
burnout creeping in. It's like, right, wait a minute now. Are these resources that I have in my life, first of all, do I have enough? Second of all, are they the ones for me? And also, are they beginning to feel a bit more like demands? Because if they are, that's really tipping the balance in the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And I really identify with that. I think that's, yeah, because I think it's probably a little bit about, and I think you and I are probably quite similar in this respect. It's a little bit about the balance of introversion and extroversion as well, where I get loads of energy from being around people. I love being in groups of people. I love chatting to people. But then I need, ideally, days on my own
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
recharge. And for me, that's a resource.
Yeah.
So,
I
um,
agree. Okay, so maybe
yeah.
that's another one of
So,
our buckets then, is like energy. So how we get our
yeah.
energy. So for some people it could be being around lots of people, or arranging something social. For someone else it could be
Yeah.
finding some moments to have time on your own. And I know that's not always either of those things. You can't always arrange on a whim, or you can't make these things happen straight away, but we can try. Like, this, the whole point of this
Yeah.
stuff is, if we know the things that work for us at different points in time, so when we are feeling low, whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally, what are some of the things that we can do? And we can't always execute everything. You know, we have lives going on, we have commitments, we have roles that we play where we might be supporting other people or looking after others. We've got things booked in, we've got work, we've, you know, or studying, we've got a whole host of things that we need to do. So we're not saying you can completely reshape your life overnight every day, although maybe some people can, and that's great. But it's having these things where you can take a little bit of control and you can do something to make you to support yourself through a period of not feeling great.
I think one of the things that I do, I've noticed that I do, is I stop and I ask myself, right, because exactly as you say, often what happens is if you're not feeling great, but you still have those demands. And, you know, in my case, I work for myself, as do you. And so I don't get to call someone up and say, I'm not going to be into work today because, you know, I have to do what I've committed to doing. And let's be real, most people in a professional context these days also can't really do that because they have commitments to their team. You know, often teams are kind of under-resourced. And therefore, if they call in sick, they know they're letting other people down, or, you know, they know it's not possible. So, I mean, we could argue about whether that's right or wrong, but I'm just saying a lot of people still don't even feel like, even if they're in a job, they don't feel like they can ring in sick. So, and then of course, if you're a parent, there's no ringing in sick there either. So you still do have to keep going. So what I say to myself in that situation where I'm going, right, I don't feel great. Ideally, I would love to just rest right now, but I can't. So what do I do instead? I say to myself, okay, what's important? What is important today that I get done? And I try my very best to only focus on that thing and to just let everything else go. And that can be really hard because it can mean that the house is a mess, or, you know, because I'm like, I cannot expend that energy. Going back to the energy board, I can't expend that energy on anything that is not critical right now. And it often means, you know, I've got all these to-do lists swirling around in the back of my head with things that I really want to be doing, you know, clearing out my wardrobe, for example. That's a really good one because that never gets done. It always falls down to the bottom of the list. But you have to make a choice, you know, on a day where you don't feel great. You have to make a choice and go, okay, well, I do have to do this thing, and I have to show up for the kids. I've got to make them dinner. I have to make sure that they're fed and well, and got to get them to school. All of those things. Those are the things I got to do. And if I do those, and okay, I might have to let other things fall through the cracks today, I think that I'm going to have to be okay with that. So I think that's important because, you know, often when you step back and ask yourself that, you realize that a lot of the things that are on your mental to-do list are things that, like, unrealistic expectations of yourself, and or maybe unrealistic expectations that you kind of learned from others or that society has sort of imprinted on you. So it's really important to ask yourself that question. Actually ask yourself that question every day. You know, what's important here for me? What's important here for the people this outcome affects? You know, whether that's people in your team or the customer you're working towards or your kids or whatever. What's important, and just focus on that. Because you can't, if you're not feeling great, you cannot possibly be everything to everyone. So I think that's something I would definitely do quite a lot. And it does mean things don't get done, which is hard because, you know, especially when you're chronically sick, when you're sick over a long period of time, it just means that things that are on your mental to-do list, they stay there. And that can be hard as well because, you know, it's like that thing is still there. That's annoying me. But
that is also
you have
part
to
of
ask.
life. And we
Yeah,
have to make
exactly.
choices. I think that's really useful advice. You said that to me a while ago, and it changed me. This is such a strange example, but it changed me getting the kids to school. So it used to be quite stressful getting out the door in the morning and, you know, the inevitable, there are no water bottles and someone's lost their book bag and all of that jazz.
Oh, don't. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, even the thought of it, like even the thoughts
I
of
know.
that process makes
Ugh.
my chest feel a bit tight.
Yeah.
It's so because also I'm trying to get the girls to like get them like take accountability and get themselves out the door and da-da. But equally, half time I'm kind of like shoving stuff in their hands or figuring out what's what they've got that they haven't got. And 2 days a week I take the dog to school as well because the dog walker takes him out twice a week. There's a little pack of friends. Which is lovely, but trying to get him in the car as well when he's like jumping around like a lamb trying to get in and running on the road and the kids can't find their shoes and I used to get last year I got really, really stressed about getting them to school. And this year I haven't got stressed once. And I've asked myself that exact question, what matters here? And I'm like, what matters
Yeah.
is they get to school at a reasonable time. We never make it as early as I want to, but they get there at a reasonable time. They're not stressed because I'm not stressed.
Yeah.
They're happy walking in because the worst thing is when they go in and you can see like they're upset and I'm like, oh God, they're going to have a whole day
Yeah.
of
I
this
know.
now. And it's probably because I've been stressed and shouted. So, and don't get me wrong, my day falls apart as soon as I've dropped them off. I'm like, oh my God, what do I need to do work-wise? And I've got to get this and da da da. But it's been such a nicer experience. And I just think to myself, what's important here? The important thing is they get in school, they're happy, they're not stressed. They're not going for a job interview, even if they are a little bit late. Like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah. Yeah.
5 and 7, and I'm sure people working in schools be like, that is not the attitude. And I promise, I try my
Mm,
best. I try my best to get them there on time. But I don't want
I
to
hear you.
sacrifice that for exactly as you say, some kind of like external expectation,
Yeah.
which doesn't really matter to me. I mean, I am keen on timekeeping, but it's not the most important thing in my life. Uh,
Sorry, that's a great quote. I am keen on timekeeping.
but that's a really like
I'm quite
bizarre
keen on it too.
example of
No,
like,
I think that's a great example. I think that's a brilliant example because you do have to question. I mean, obviously, we do have to all exist within the parameters of society, and we have to teach the kids that we're keen on timekeeping. But also, the world has changed a little bit over the last few years, and when they grow up, they aren't going to be going to a 9 to 5 job. And,
no.
there may be some fluidity in terms of when they do their work and how they do their work. Certainly more than when we were going to our first jobs.
Yeah.
And I'm not advocating a situation where our kids are kind of really lax about timekeeping and we want to keep them keen. But um, but exactly that. I think it's and obviously when they get to college, they're gonna have to be in time for their lectures and all of that. But I want to be careful about what I'm advocating here.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think we don't want to sacrifice our well-being and our stress levels just to stay on
Yeah.
top of something that's an external expectation.
100%.
So it's a bit of a balance between both.
And
So
hopefully, the stuff that we're talking about, so getting to know what you're feeling, what you need at different times, may I think we're just going to need more and more of this as time goes on because I
mm,
feel like in life we talk about this stuff more than ever. We talk about well-being, looking after ourselves, and there's probably a little bit more flexibility around that. Certainly compared to when I first started work, for example. Um, and I'm sure that will continue. But then it's very hard to articulate, I'm just not feeling great, or I just need to work this
mm,
way, or I just need to pause, or I just need to think, you think
yeah.
about someone that would benefit from going to the gym at lunchtime to keep their energy up in the afternoon, or going for a walk, like stepping away from something, whether that be, house stuff going on or work stuff going on, or like
Mm,
actually just taking some time out. And I think the more we talk about these things as these are, and I love your phrase, you've talked a little bit about this before, like the power up phrase. I love this idea of
yeah.
giving yourself a little boost. Like that
Boost.
is
Yeah.
really what we're talking about today. We're not
Yeah.
talking about, uh, you know, navigating big challenges, although this does work for that as well. But it's these
Mm,
little boosts that help us to feel better, connect with other people better, potentially. Um, and potentially work better as well, and be more
Yeah.
productive and be more satisfied, joyful sometimes as well. So I
100.
love, maybe maybe that's what we're really getting to, like figuring out what our power ups are. And
Power
so
up.
how would
And
you describe that?
so the power up idea, if anybody hasn't heard me talking about this, I will quickly go over it, but I feel like I talk about this quite a lot. And I've managed to weave it into a few of my LinkedIn learning courses, but it's something that I kind of realized during the lockdowns of 2020 when we were playing Super Mario. And we were all feeling very overwhelmed with the chaos of the world at that point, at that time. And sometimes when you're playing Super Mario, it can be a bit chaotic there too. So, and you realize, sometimes you just want to give up because you can't get past a certain level. But you realize the thing that keeps you going is a power up, right, in the game. So if you've not played the game, the power ups are things like a little mushroom that makes you bigger, or it's a cape that helps you fly past a deadly crevice or whatever, flying turtles. And it gives you that boost. It gives you that boost. Oh, I can keep going. I can keep going through this level. I can keep going. And it gives you a boost to motivation. It gives you a boost to feeling of your own capability. And so at that time, I realized, oh, yeah, that's what I need in my life every day. I need a power up every day to get me through each day. Because really, we were all taking day at a time at that time, weren't we? And actually, I realized, oh, yeah, this is a bit like self-efficacy, which we talk about in terms of change, building the belief in our own capability to get through whatever lies ahead, even when we don't know what that will be. That's the skill we need when change is on our horizon, because often we just lose that sense of power. So giving yourself that power up. So definitely something to do when we're feeling well is to every day find a way to give yourself a power up, and that could be anything from something tiny like, tidying up the desktop on your laptop to make you feel a little bit better about yourself and to make you remind yourself of your capabilities for being organized. Or it could be something much bigger. It could be, oh, my power up today is that I smashed my presentation at my team meeting, or I managed to have a very enjoyable dinner with the kids where they weren't throwing food on the floor. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I know. Can you imagine?
No.
But no, I know. Um, but when you're not well as well, I would use it. Or when things aren't going well, I would use it in the context of that really small power up, that really just tiny thing. Like one little, I always think about it as like that little gift to your future self. Do something that will remind you in the future that even when you weren't feeling great, you managed to do that. And it kind of goes like a cycle, because then in the future, and then when you feel a bit unwell again, you'll remind yourself, well, you know what? I wasn't feeling great that time, but I still managed to do that. Like, I'm not feeling great today, to be honest. A little nap before we came on. And I'm really glad we're doing this podcast, because although this isn't, for us, it's not mega hard work, right? But it's an effort. It's still, we have to show up. We've got to, I
You've
gotta
got to think.
put makeup on. Yeah, got to think. I am thinking. I
I'm
mean, it might
thinking
not
too.
sound like it. Yeah. But it'll be a power up for me today, because I'll know that, God, I was feeling pretty wrecked that day, a bit jet lagged, and my coughing still a bit. So but I know that I managed to do this, and for me, that's a bit of a power up, because it's a boost. It's like you need to show your brain a bit of evidence that you have capability, because otherwise, it so easily starts talking you down, and that's when you get into a bit of a negative spiral, isn't it? So this is where, again, the self-talk stuff and the stories we tell ourselves are really important when it comes to when you're not feeling great, because you can easily start getting into what we call in psychology affective forecasting, which is basically like when you're not feeling great, it's very easy to forecast into the future and think that that is a permanent state. But by giving yourself a power up and by reminding yourself, no, I do actually have capability, it reminds you, no, this is not permanent. I can do these things. Even when I don't feel great, I can do these things, and in future I'll feel better.
You're breaking the
So
cycle.
you're breaking the cycle. Yeah. And it's just, and what I like about it is, as well, something you're giving to yourself. It's something you can do for yourself, because so often, you know, when we talk about things like change and uncertainty going on around us, so often that's all happening out of our control. And so much of the scary stuff that's going on in the world at the moment is well out of our control. We need to remind ourselves that we do have agency. We do have control over some of the things that we can do for ourselves, even if they're tiny. And it's not taking away from the fact that it's hard, and it's okay to feel that those things are hard, but it is also important to try and balance it out. Again, it's kind of going back to that, like, try and balance this out with, I do have my own power, even if it's tiny. So what's your power up? Do you have one that you go to?
I have quite a lot of power ups.
Coffee? Coffee is one.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking I'm gonna have a coffee in a minute as well. When you were talking about power up, that actually did spring to the front of my mind. Walking is quite a power up for me, particularly if it's a beautiful day here today. It's very sunny. I don't love walking in the rain, I'm going to be honest, but like, as long as it's clear skies, winter, summer, whenever, I love being outside. So that's definitely a power up. Also, I mean, this is not psychology based, but just watching something I want to watch on the TV in the quiet.
Yes.
Like,
oh yeah,
who knew that one day that was going to be my dream?
I know.
And I
It's
also
amazing.
quite like being somewhere different as well. I've got quite a novelty brain, so I like a bit of novelty. So I'll try and book in, you know, going somewhere different or seeing something different, or which does often seem like an effort. But that's kind of a bigger one. I'd say my go-to not feeling great today would be something like a really nice coffee, like a nice coffee. Like I order nice beans, and it's a process, and I have black coffee and then a cream in it, and like, you know, that whole process.
I'm coming over to you for this.
100%.
I'm actually going to book myself a flight. I like the sound of this so much.
Well, you got to remember as well, I used to teach people coffee tasting. Like back in the day when I was a trainer, I had quite the palate for coffee, and I could teach people different notes. It was like wine tasting, but for coffee.
It is.
So like,
it's so complex.
It is complex. And sometimes I can still taste something or smell something. I'll be like, I bet that's Ethiopian. And I'm like, yes, it is. So yeah, so that brings me some moments of joy. And walking, like that's my kind of, they're my little power ups.
And I like that because they are just simple things that you can do for yourself, you know, and it's not going to make things 100% better, but it might just change, just might flip the script, just enough to get you through the day. And that's kind of what you need when things aren't going so well.
So I think this whole episode really is giving people permission to prioritize a power up whenever you need it, whatever it is. It is not a nice to have. It's not what a luxury that, you know, taking 10 minutes to make a nice coffee, or it can be big things, you know, going on holiday, having a break, or they can be big things as well. Like, these things are not nice to haves. These are things that are going to help you be healthy, satisfied, well-functioning humans. And exactly as you say, it's giving yourself a gift for the future. On that note, thinking about gifts for the future, if there are any topics that anyone would like us to cover in the future, so things like, you know, some of the wild chaos you want us to talk about that you might be facing, or some tips around that, or anything to do with psychology,
even specific challenges that people are facing.
100%.
Write in and ask us, and we might not be able to solve it, but we will dissect it and help in whatever way we can.
And how do people get in touch with us, Erin?
Oh yeah, right. Let's go there. I know it starts with hello.
It's hello.
Our email address.
hello@psychologyinthewild.com.
That's the one.
I mean, one day we'll know this.
We will. It'll be so fluid and so fluent, rather. Yeah. So yeah, do get in touch, and if you are enjoying the podcast, do all the good things, subscribe, share it with anybody else who you think might like it, who might like to I feel like it's just, you know, that thing of, hopefully it's providing a little bit of connection for people, because that's what I certainly get when we talk, is realizing the things that are happening to me are happening to everybody in some way, shape or form. We're all navigating it in some way. And even just that knowledge is reassuring, and it kind of helps. It's a bit of a power up. So anybody else who you think might find it helpful. Oh, what was that revelation?
This could be a power up. Like these conversations could, I mean,
Yeah.
they're power ups for us,
Yeah.
but they could be power ups for other people. I've never
Yeah,
thought about that.
I'd like to think. Yeah, I'd like to think that that'd be good.
That's
Yeah.
exciting. Fabulous. Well, on
So
that note, then, I think we need to wrap it up and say,
you're wrapping it up.
stay safe in the
Stay
wild.
safe in the wild. Till next week.